growing up, every summer, my granny would enroll me and my cousins in swim lessons. In the mornings, we would go to swim lessons, and in the afternoon, we would come back to the house. And to avoid changing out of our swimsuits, we would spend all day outside. We would pick tomatoes from the plants, pull weeds, dig in the dirt, ride our bikes, wash my grandparents' car. It was so much fun. It was like a vacation. On a really special occasions, my uncle would come and he would take us out on his boat. And we would cruise around the Chesapeake Bay and the Severn River, wind blowing in our faces, salt water splashing, and he would let us jump off of the side. And we would jump in the water, and that water was so warm and salty and refreshing. And some of these experiences, riding around the bay, swimming in it, pulling weeds and digging in the dirt, they were some of my first and favorite experiences in the outside. I think awareness and personal experiences really connect us to nature. And it wasn't until I went to college that I really realized this. I went to college studying psychology. It was what my mom studied, so I really couldn't decide. But I ended up studying biology because some of my professors said I was really good at it, but honestly, it was because we spent so much time outside, and I really learned to love the environment. We collected insects and tracked turtles, walked nature trails, collected water from streams, and all of these things, digging in the dirt, being around water, they were some of the things I did as a little girl, so it was really my comfort zone. I went to school in the rural South. I went to a school in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. So it was a bit of a culture shock for me. Look, I'm from Maryland, the DMV, so it's multicultural, it's progressive, a lot more than Rocky Mount, North Carolina. And I really didn't experience racial discrimination and that lack of mixing until I went to college. And it was pretty black and white. I mean, if you were black, you hung out with black people. If you were white, you hung out with white people, unless you were on one of the sports teams. But my personality and my friend group, we challenged the norm. So in high school, I studied some courses at a local community college. And it looked really great on my transcript, but it looked a little suspicious to one of my professors. I was one of the few freshmen in a mostly upperclassmen trigonometry class. And one day this professor, she asked me to stay after class. And she looked up at me and she said, "I know you're cheating, and you might as well just drop this class." And I looked at her confused because I really didn't know where this was coming from. And I'm sure you can read between the lines because, yeah, the professor was white and I'm black. And at first I didn't want to realize that it was my race or my age that really made me have these feelings of dismissal and rejection. And it wasn't until an advisor vouched for me that she even decided not to follow through on her threat. And it really was hard for me, and I really pushed hard to prove it to her, but prove it to myself that I was capable of succeeding. And I did, and I graduated with honors. So that summer, I moved back home, and when I moved back home, if you live in my parents' household, you had to find a job. So that summer, I was looking hard, and I was trying to find something in science as a career, but I had little to no experience. But I got lucky. I was able to get a job with this program called Summer Greenworks. It employed high school students, mostly from low-income communities of color in the city of Annapolis. And I was excited. I was going to be their crew leader. I would help them with trail maintenance and landscaping, basically a job outside. But on our first day, we felt really unwelcomed and just really dismissed by our host site. And I hated that feeling. And I hated that for them because these were kids that looked like me, and they were from where I was from, and they were feeling that same insignificance and dismissal. So I did my best. I talked to them about what I loved about nature and the environment, about swimming in the bay and experiences that I had growing up. And I told them stories about people who looked like them, who harvested around the bay, gathering oysters and crabs and captaining boats. And I think those stories, I hope they inspired them. They felt empowered because someone who looked like them cared about nature, and they had a new appreciation of the work. And every day when we started in the morning, they would run up to me. They were so excited to see me and hear stories about my childhood and about what I loved about nature. And I feel encouraged that someone that looked like them could help them understand that we were making a difference, even if it was picking up trash or maintenance on this trail. So after a year-long internship, I was able to get a job at an environmental organization. And I was pretty excited. I would be around people who liked the same things, who cared about the same things that I cared about. And I worked around the Chesapeake Bay. I planted trees and oysters, and I really soaked up all that I could and learned all that I could. But unfortunately, a lot of people in this field, they don't look like me. But my granny encouraged me, and she told me to learn all that I could, and she shared stories with me about my own grandfather who worked for University of Maryland as an extension agent, and he taught farmers about their crops and worked with youth organizations and taught them about agriculture and outdoor experiences. And his legacy inspired me, and it really pushed me to learn all that I could, driving boats and tractors and really becoming a lifelong learner of the Bay. So for the past 5 years, I've worked at this environmental organization, Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and I learned a lot. I planted trees, I've planted oysters, I've learned a lot about the bay and the science, the critters that live there, all of those things. But again, a lot of people don't look like me. And most recently, my job shifted to really focus on water quality and communities and how they're impacted. And I've witnessed kind of that disconnect between human connections to nature. And the more that I learned about environmental justice issues, I really see that a lot of organizations, they really care about the trees and the critters, and not so much the communities that are affected by these environmental issues. And it's really important that we realize that they need help. And for too long, they've been ignored and dismissed. You know, people are really fighting for their land that's being proposed for landfills and gas pipelines, or they're being ignored by agencies when they're dealing with major flooding and sewage backups. And I want to stop that. I want to be part of the change. Let me give you an example. So since 2002, Baltimore City has been a part of a modified consent decree for sanitary sewer overflows. Basically, the city is charged with fixing the pipes that discharge raw sewage into local waterways. But sometimes those pipes, they fill up and they cause major backups in people's homes. And since 1957, this particular community in Edna Gardens Lakeside has been dealing with this problem for decades. And about 3 years ago, a woman named Miss Pam, she called CBF because she had seen us in the paper and learned about some of the work we were doing on this issue. And she wanted to tell us her story about how her and her neighbors have been dealing with this. Last year alone, there had been 7,000 backups and overflows in the city. So my colleague and I, we built this very trusting, inspiring relationship with Miss Pam and her neighbors, and learned about the stories and learned about the history. And it wasn't until recently, decades later, that there's even been some momentum on solving this issue. And that's really important because for far too long, this community has been ignored and dismissed. And I understand that feeling. For me, it was just my freshman trigonometry class. It was just my summer work experience with the high school students. But this is their lives. This is their home. So what do we do about it? Addressing environmental injustice is a process. It's about really the ultimate goal of equal access and opportunities for healthy environment for all people. And we really have to listen to perspectives and knowledge. And until we do that, that awareness and acknowledgement, it will continue to exist. But environmental justice issues at all are inseparable of personal experiences. And until we listen to perspectives and understand the history and share those stories, that we will finally reduce those barriers and allow for opportunities for solutions, so that what Ms. Pam and her neighbors are dealing with, no one else has to go through that. And students who are shy in their freshman trigonometry class aren't ignored or dismissed, and people who look like me are a part of this movement for a healthy environment. Thank you.